Miami had a big win versus the Boston Celtics on Wednesday, but with the playoffs set to start in just a few days, there are still questions about this team. We'll be talking about Jimmy Butler's offense, turning the team over to Tyler Herro, and the most disappointing teams in franchise history, all on this special mailbag episode of Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, Heat Nation. It's a Friday edition of Locked On Heat, your daily podcast covering all things Miami Heat, however you may be listening or watching on YouTube, Odyssey, or on your favorite podcast app. Thank you so much for making us your first listen every day. I'm David Ramil, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Wes Goldberg. We're still kind of feeling the buzz for that big win against the Celtics on Wednesday, but with Miami taking a break for a couple days until they take on the Chicago Bulls on Saturday, we wanted to go ahead and open up the mailbag and answer some of your questions as this team rolls towards the playoffs. And we'll start off, Wes, with this first one that comes from Terry. He actually left this one via our YouTube comment section. So we love getting that kind of feedback. We do check those questions regularly. If we don't respond there, it's probably because we're going to save it for an episode like this. Well, this one comes from Terry. He writes, the Heat might have won the game, but there were some troubling signs that appeared in the game. First, there is the size issue. The Celtics pounded the glass against the undersized Heat. Maybe that's an omen. I don't know, but time will tell. That sounds kind of mysterious there. Is it an omen, Wes? What do you think? Is this a bad sign that Miami couldn't control the rebounding edge against a team like the Boston Celtics?
Not really. We've heard the size concerns all season long. It's a big reason why like the Yurt season gang is out there claiming that he needs to be starting or playing more. Big reason why a lot of fans are saying you should move Bam to power forward and start Deadman or whatever it might be. But when you look at the numbers, I know it looks bad sometimes because the Heat are relatively small, right? Like they don't have anybody outside of Dwayne Dedman and Omer Yurtseven who's taller than 6'10", basically. And so, but the numbers have been okay all year long. They are allowing the fewest points in the paint per game this season, just 41.1 points allowed in the paint to opponents all season long. They're allowing the sixth fewest second chance points in the NBA and the fifth fewest offensive rebounds percentage to opponents too. So it's not like size is crushing them on the season. Now, at the risk of inundating our listeners with too many numbers, I was a little curious because usually size isn't really a concern in today's NBA anyway. But when you are playing a bigger team, maybe that's when the size concerns are more concerning, right? More of an issue. And in the playoffs, in potential matchups, I'm not really worried about Boston's size. I don't care. But in the playoffs against a team like Philadelphia with Joel Embiid or Milwaukee with all of their players, maybe it is more of a concern, right? Well, against the Philadelphia 76ers this year in 4 games the Heat played against them, 8.5 offensive rebounds per game for Philadelphia. So not a lot. That's not a lot. Only 11.8 second chance points, right in line with what Miami usually gives up. And 38.5 points in the paint for Philadelphia, which is less than what Miami gives up on average. Against Milwaukee, a little bit more concerning. Almost 12 offensive rebounds a game to the Bucks, a little bit more than 15 second chance points per game to the Bucks, and they're allowing 43.5 points per game in those matchups, a little bit more than their 41 point per game average, but still not terrible, right? Like that would not rank even close to the bottom of the league. That would be still near the top 10 or 12 in the league at that rate too. So the size concerns have not been glaring, and they have not killed the Heat so far this season on average or in those specific matchups. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean anything when the playoffs come around, but it does mean that Miami knows that this is a problem and they're boxing out a ton and they're taking care of things. There's ways to combat size. There's a lot of ways to do it, and they tend to be doing it on average.
My feeling is that you trust Eric Spoelstra in these kinds of situations, and not to lean as heavily as you have in the past, claiming that rebounding is a loser stat or anything like that. But I don't think Spo. I don't think Spo is worried about the rebounding edge, and I think the players all account for rebounding. We've heard them say this dozens of times. It feels like in press conference or in talking to them in person. It's that they're not necessarily obsessed with the rebounding edge, but they want to be a gang rebounding, a team rebounding. Focus has to be widespread throughout this group in order for them to succeed. Not just because of the rebounding, not because of just preventing second chance points, but also because it initiates so much of their fast break offense, where they get all those look aheads from Kyle Lowry, where they are able to get to a easy and early bucket before the defense sets in and things of that sort. So my feeling is that it's not as much of a concern if they all do what they do well, and if, to your point, if they're able to box out, keep bigger bodies away from the glass, or challenge them more frequently and regularly, it's not that big a deal. They can come away losing the rebounding battle and still win the game like they did against the Celtics. And I think that's more towards this version of this Miami team, and it still lends itself to winning, which is ultimately what matters.
Yeah.
So they don't. I wish I could say off the top of my head if there was a team that didn't rebound particularly well and still managed to win the NBA. Oh wait, it's the Big Three era. They didn't particularly rebound well, and they still managed to do a pretty good job.
Yeah, I mean, obviously this Heat team doesn't have the top end talent and the scoring that the LeBron, Chris Bosh, D Wade teams had. But I see your point, and that's why I always say that rebounding is a loser stat. I will say this: rebounding. I know that fans get so into just size, and I get it, right? Like basketball is a big man's game. It's a game that self-selects for size. I understand that. I get it. Rebounding is more of a hustle stat. It reflects more of a team's effort than it does a team's size, right? Obviously, size has something to do with it. The best rebounders in the league are the biggest players in the league. But the Heat lead the league in box outs, according to NBA's tracking data. 11 box outs per game, according to this tracking data. Far and away the best team in the league as far as just boxing out. Just doing the basics.
That shows effort.
Right? It shows effort, and it shows fundamentals, and it shows that this team knows what they need to do to make up for that relative lack of size. The Knicks, by the way, are second at 10.3, and those are the two teams. That's it, period. It's the Eric Spoelstra coach team and the Tom Thibodeau coach team are the only teams in the league averaging double-digit box outs per game. And so, look, no team is perfect. One of the Heat's strengths comes from the fact that they aren't big, right? They're super switchy. They're very quick.
Right.
They all these things, like they're really good at the point of attack too, which is another big way to quell sort of the size concerns too, is just stop guys from getting into the paint altogether. But they're doing what they need to do. Does that mean that Joel Embiid isn't going to destroy them in the paint if there's a matchup, or that Giannis isn't going to just leap over them for a bunch of offensive rebounds and stuff in a potential matchup with Milwaukee? Absolutely not. But Joel Embiid and Giannis do that to literally every team in the league. So it doesn't make Miami special. I'm not concerned about the size thing, especially with the way the league is trending.
Yeah, and look, some of what you sacrifice by having a classic rim protector or a rebounding big and Bam is his defensive versatility, which makes this team so good and makes him, in our opinion, the defensive player of the year, is because he does so well. Great statistic from Cooper Moorhead, I think, via Twitter today, in a response to Marcus Smart talking about his defensive player of the year candidacy and hit the number of switches he does, guarding 1 through 5, allegedly. And yet the number pales in comparison to the number of switches just in the limited time that Bam has actually played during this season. He's missed a bunch of games, obviously. 6 times as many switches over the course of this season than Marcus Smart. That he is the most switchable player in the NBA, bar none.
By far. And especially with Ben Simmons out. Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's what makes this team special. And you brought up a good, a little bit of a buzzword, high IQ, right? But this team, when we talked about this team being assembled, part of the why it was assembled with championship level experience in Lowry and Tucker, even to some extent Markieff Morris and Jimmy Butler and Bam, is their high IQ. They're all a bunch of dogs. They fight, they contend. This team knows about, if not the size to be able to pull down those easy rebounds, they anticipate rebounding at an incredibly high level.
Mm-hmm.
Tyler Herro is a perfect sample of that. Like all the questions about him being drafted because of his short arm length and everything else like that, he's turned out to be an excellent rebounding guard because he anticipates very, very at an extremely high level. And I think the rest of the team follows suit. And given that, they'll be able to win a few games here and there despite losing the overall rebounding battle. And I think it'll still, again, lend itself to winning. So
I know we're running up against the break here, but can I just give you my quick top 3 for Defensive Player of the Year?
Yes.
I've got Giannis, in no order. Giannis, Bam, Marcus Smart. Rudy Gobert would have been in it, but Utah has slipped out of the top 10 defensively that I just can't put him in it anymore. But
Yeah.
if you wanted to make the advanced analytics still are very strong for Rudy Gobert. So if you wanted to throw him in maybe a group of 4, but that's my top group. I think it's got to be one of those 4. And I don't think Gobert has a chance to win it. So it would be between Giannis, Bam, and Gobert or Marcus Smart for me.
Smart. Yeah,
But
I know a
honestly,
lot of
I probably Giannis and Bam are probably the leaders there.
Yeah, and I know some people like in Phoenix and in Boston are saying, "Oh, why don't guards get picked?" I was banging the Bruce Bowen for Defensive Player of the Year drum before anybody else. I think that's perfectly fine. LeBron certainly had a few years in Miami where he was a Defensive Player of the Year candidate and didn't lost it to Marcus Gasol. And yet,
Shouldn't have.
I still think no, I agree 100%. And yet, I also think that Bam is the best defender in the NBA. And I think despite the number of games he's missed, him. Draymond, they're up there. They're undersized for their respective positions, and they still play at an extremely high level. So, well, we'll take a break. We had another question to ask about the top players on this Heat roster, but we'll address that in the next episode. But before we do that, just a reminder, this show is brought to you by BetOnline. After months of playing, college basketball has determined the top teams for the Final Four and will determine this year's national championship this coming week on Monday. BetOnline.net is your number one source for all your betting needs and sports info from all the latest odds, contests, and player props, you name it, including Defensive Player of the Year candidacy. BetOnline remains the best spot for all of your latest sports developments, including podcasts, reviews for all the leagues this season. It's not just basketball. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sporting wagering information needs, including live betting and your favorite Vegas casino games. So head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts.
Thank you for making Locked On Heat your first listen. For your next listen, check out the Locked On Now podcast, nightly recaps of every NBA game with analysis from our local experts. It's free and available wherever you get your podcasts.
We'll move on to this question that we were going to try to get squeezed into that first segment. But this one comes in from our good pal Pete. He writes in, can you list your top 7 Heat players for the playoffs and why they make your top 7? I believe this group has to be trimmed down from here on out, no matter the salary. So, Pete, a little bit pressured there because this question came in a few days ago. I think in advance of the Max Strus rotation change and Duncan clearly the odd man out. So let's get into it. Who are your top 7 players?
Well, the way he phrases the question is, can you? And and that's a yes or no question. We're trained as media people not to ask yes or no questions. But since he didn't ask it that way, or since he did ask it that way, my answer is no.
No.
I can't trim it down to a top 7, but I'll try. I'll give it a shot here. I kind of broke it out into tiers, David.
Okay.
To me, there's a 4 locked in to the playoff rotation. Doesn't have anything to do with starters, whatever. These 4 are getting minutes. We don't have to get into the details, but it's Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo, Kyle Lowry, Tyler Herro. That's your 4.
Same.
You know that they're getting a lot of minutes. I've got a second tier, and I'm not really sure why he's not in my first tier, but he's just not. I just think in maybe certain matchups it could be a little bit more flexible. I think I think that top 4, their minutes are going to be pretty consistent throughout. 30 plus minutes a night, no matter the matchup.
Yep.
PJ Tucker, it could fluctuate, right? With him. Like we saw against Boston, he wasn't part of that closing lineup, and that's just won't be a major dip in minutes, but it is one. And so that's just, he's in a tier by himself, second tier, but still a night-to-night player. Then I've got a third tier, Duncan Robinson, Max Strus, and Dwayne Dedmon. I think that's 8. Yeah, I told you, I can't do it to 7. And then you've got a fourth tier, Caleb Martin and Gabe Vincent. Now, to address the third tier first, I think Robinson and Strus will both play. I don't think that it's a situation where it's going to be one or the other. In today's NBA, you need as much three-point shooting as possible. It feels like Spoelstra likes the Duncan Robinson and Tyler Herro combo coming off the bench. Dwayne Dedmon is going to be really important. I could see him maybe getting played off the floor in some matchups. I just don't really see what matchup it would be. Like maybe against Brooklyn or maybe even like a team like Toronto, I could see it. But in most matchups, I think he'll get he'll be your top center off the bench. And then for Caleb Martin and Gabe Vincent in that fourth tier, I think that could be a one or the other type of decision for Spoelstra, depending on the matchup. Do I need to lean more guard, more ball handler? Do I need to lean more wing? And defending those kinds of players, you can go with Gabe Vincent or Caleb Martin, depending.
Yeah, I like the tier system. I tried sticking to Pete's original question and just listing my top 7. So I've still got the same top 5 as you do, Jimmy. In terms of overall impact, I still lean heavily towards this team going as far as Jimmy Butler can take him. And while he
Yes.
has to take a step back, maybe play a little bit more off ball as he has against Sacramento and Boston, I think the reality is that there's still, and maybe this is in vain, maybe I'm completely way off base, but I still think he has another level to reach, the level that perhaps, again, faultly we might be holding him to, which is what we saw in the bubble,
Mhm.
but he can do it. And if that's the case, this team can go all the way
I
to
was
the
thinking
NBA
about
Finals.
this exact thing the other day. If the Heat are going to win the NBA Finals, it'll take LeBron playing like one of the best wings in the NBA, right? I mean,
Mhm.
it'll take Jimmy being that kind of player, like going toe to toe with LeBron type of player.
Yeah,
Or it'll take Bam Adebayo playing like the MVP bigs this year, right? Going toe to toe with either Giannis or Joel Embiid, or the Nuggets won't make it, but playing at like a Nikola Jokic type level. Um, what is more likely? It's Jimmy Butler, right? I mean, I think
absolutely.
right, like that's what that's how I feel. And maybe you're right. Maybe that's just because we saw it recently and we're just beholden to that recency bias or whatever it is. But I've seen that. I haven't seen Bam. We've seen Bam take a leap this year, no doubt about it. We know what he could do
Yeah,
when he's super aggressive, but we haven't seen him hit Giannis, Jokic, Joel Embiid, MVP type of levels. We've seen Jimmy Butler do it, and so I
yeah,
would lean towards Jimmy Butler as most likely to do that. So I'm with you. He's sort of the top dog right now. Still,
yeah.
he should be. Yeah.
And look, that's not a significant drop off for Bam to be the second most likely impactful player because of what
Right.
he does defensively, because of what he can do offensively when he chips in those really efficient 20, 21 points on a given night. All of a sudden, Miami's chances of winning are much, much better. Kyle, to me, is still the third most impactful player here because
Hmm.
we've seen his offense trending upward and what he does defensively, what he does from an organizational perspective, how he's a leader out on the floor. Those things matter, as I think, to me, more than just Tyler's pure scoring, which this team can live with and can also live without. I still think that Kyle's impact is greater. Now that it puts Tyler at 4 because of what he can do. PJ, to your point, is fifth most important because he has that experience, because he provides high level defense, because he's a body that you can throw and trust out there. He won't cost you a game. He probably won't win you a game either. I've got Deadman as the sixth most important player in terms of
I'm
expected
okay with that.
impact. Just
Yeah.
because to me, look, we know Bam's minutes are going to go up from about 32-ish, 33-ish per game to about 36, 37 per game. That leaves still about 12 minutes per game that you need somebody to fill in. And yes, you'll have PJ occasionally at the 5. Who knows if you'll have Markieff Morris out there for any extended time. But if Deadman's going to be playing 10 to 12 minutes a game, he needs to be impactful. The version that we saw even in his few minutes yesterday against Boston, I think, is what this team needs in order to contend the size issues that we talked about in the first segment. So given that he's my sixth most impactful, and I just think that the tide has turned now where Duncan is no longer going to be the favorite child for Eric Spoelstra, and it's Max Strus. He's my seventh most
Hmm.
impactful player. And I still have questions about what Caleb Martin can do in the playoffs. I
Of
still have
course.
questions about what Gabe Vincent can
Yeah.
do. We haven't seen them in these scenarios, and I think it's
Right.
just logical to say, what are they going to do? Is Gabe going to be picked on, etc.? There's going to be issues. If they change my perspective, well, then that I'll be the first to say, I was wrong. At the same time, I just don't know. We can't anticipate it because we haven't seen it. But we'll move on to this next question. Excuse me, that comes in from Omar. He writes in, Dr. Omar. Jimmy Butler has shot 35% or better from three 5 times during his career. He's currently shooting the worst shooting percentage from range since his rookie season. In my experience, players usually become better, not worse shooters later in their careers. This is important because it reduces the physical toll on their bodies and usually extends their careers. Could the wrist injury early in his Heat tenure be the cause? With the injury starting to accumulate, are we concerned that a rapid decline could be coming? So the first question there, I mean,
Yeah.
could the wrist injury in early on be a problem? And I think that's obvious. I also think that he's just compensating a lot on his shooting form. Like we don't have to be Rob Fodor who helped unleash Duncan Robinson in order to say that there's something absolutely wonky with Jimmy's shooting form on occasion. Like there are moments like he shot them against Boston where the stroke looked good, and Sacramento again the stroke looked good. He was knocking them down, and there are times where he splits his feet apart, shoots off balance, looks awkward, looks like he's fading away on 3-point shots. you're never going to hit that shot. You're just not good enough a shooter to be able to take the shots. Nobody can, with the exception of that Steph Curry guy. He's pretty exceptional. And knowing that, I don't think it has anything to do with the injury so much. It's just Jimmy and a mental issue. Like Jimmy is perhaps the most confident player in the NBA, or one of the most confident players, certainly on this roster. And yet there are moments where he hesitates, where he's not sure what to do when he's beyond the perimeter. And some of that kind of ties together into how he unloads his shot each and every game.
He's not a natural shooter. The stroke looks okay. John Crotty has pointed this out on broadcast. Like when he's getting the arc out, up and everything like that. Obviously, it's good, but he's not a natural shooter, and he's really good at just getting to the basket and getting to the foul line. And so it's no wonder that he does that more often. But his teammates have been telling him to shoot more, and maybe that's one of the reasons why he's been shooting that three slightly more. Right, like he's shooting like one a game. I know he made 3 the other night. That's a Jimmy Butler making 3 threes in a game is unheard of. I mean, this is a guy who will go a month without taking a single attempt from beyond the arc. Can I just read this Tyler Herro quote really quick from the Miami Herald? Yes. He says, according to Tyler Herro, Jimmy Butler is a good shooter. This is a quote from Tyler Herro. Quote, Jimmy can shoot. People don't think he can shoot. The numbers I don't think explain how good of a shooter he is. I would say that is impossible. I think that we're pretty sure that the numbers explain exactly how good any NBA player is as a shooter, right? It's not like either the ball goes in or it doesn't go in. And that is completely reflected in the numbers. It's not like this is not a situation where the numbers are lying to us. Jimmy Butler has not been a good three-point shooter for his entire career. This is not even like a Draymond Green example, right? When I covered the Warriors, everybody's like, why can't he shoot 38% from 3 again? That was an anomaly year. Like Jimmy Butler doesn't even have that. Right? Yeah. He doesn't even have that weird anomaly year. He's just not a good three-point shooter. It's okay. He doesn't have to be.
But maybe maybe that ties into the psychological component. Maybe Tyler's basing his good shooting analysis on what he sees in practice, where Jimmy is absolutely a good shooter, and then he just goes out there into the floor. I'm not you don't want to throw around a word like a choke or anything like that, but he gets in his own head. We've seen it with Duncan.
When you've got real defenders closing out on you, everybody I'm sure looks good in practice. But when you have real that's the difference. Right? Yeah. Like that's the NBA is doing it like that. That's what makes guys like Steph and Duncan Robinson and Max Strus special, is that they can shoot at a high rate with guys closing out on them in the flow of a game. There are emotions. There are things. You're right. It's not choking. It is psychological, but it's supposed to be.
Right.
That's why these guys are the NBA. That's why it's hard.
Shaq was a really good free throw shooter in practice too. We'll move on. This next question comes in from Hayden. He writes in, sound effect?
Oh, yeah.
He's on fire!
There we go. Here you guys talk about whether or not to give the ball to Bam and make it his team rather than Butler's, or at least run the offense primarily through Bam. Made me think, do you think that running the offense primarily through Herro is as good an option? In no way am I saying Bam and Jimmy aren't good. It just looks more natural / organic / creative when Herro is the main guy. Why is this not as good an option as going to Bam?
We'll be quick with this one because I know we're running up against the break here, but I have no problem with this. I actually do think 2, 3, 4 years, I don't know, however long it takes, it's irrelevant. But I do think we're going to get to a point that as long as Tyler Herro and Bam Adebayo, like there's kind of 2 different timelines happening with this team, right? You've got the Jimmy Butler, Kyle Lowry, PJ Tucker, Pat Riley timeline. And then you've got the Eric Spoelstra, Bam Adebayo, Tyler Herro timeline. And I do think when that group, when the Bam and Tyler 2-man game sort of takes over, and a quick aside, that's why it was so impressive to see what they did together against the Celtics last night in that 2-man game. It was really cool. But I could see a world where Tyler Herro is sort of the alpha and the offense sort of runs through him, and Bam is more of a not to say that it won't still run through Bam. He's not going to he'll still get the ball in the post and they'll run split cuts off of it and all the things that we see with Bam Adebayo. But it wouldn't shock me if Tyler Herro was sort of the running the offense. I think that's kind of what they're grooming him to do. I wrote about it in my Miami Herald feature about him. Like they want to see more playmaking from him. He is a shot maker, and the way the league is trending, it would maybe be that kind of guy. I don't know. Like it's a conversation. Like I know that Nikola Jokic runs the offense in Denver, but Jamal Murray is like right there too, running off of him when he's healthy. So I think it could be something a little bit more like that. But I don't know which way it'll lean more one way or the other.
Is this just about him being somewhat early in his career and not, having I don't know what the exact word is, that the experience to be able to have the ball in his hands all the time, or like he hasn't earned it. He's not that veteran. He's not the man on this team.
He's not ready
Or is it
yet. I mean, he's just simply not ready yet, Tyler Herro. Like,
from an on-court perspective, you don't
yeah.
think he can run the offense?
No, not the way that Kyle or Jimmy do. Like, he doesn't have that basketball experience or the IQ that comes with the experience, or just
That's
yeah.
fair.
I mean, it makes sense to make sure that Jimmy and Kyle are running the offense, but I think with time, Tyler Herro will do that. And the thing with Tyler that Bam doesn't really have is sort of like the chutzpah, right? Like that's sort of what it takes to run an NBA offense. And I could see Tyler Herro just sort of being, I don't know who's passing more, who's getting more shots up. I could just see it being Tyler Herro's offense. Whatever that means, I could see that being the case 4 years down the line or whenever.
I think that's fair. And you included chutzpah in there, so kudos to you. And we'll take a break here, and then we'll talk about the most disappointing teams in Heat history. We've got some a little trip down memory lane that we want to take you through. But before we do that, just a note that this show is brought to you by Built Bar. Look, we've talked about it before. It's hard to stick to your resolutions at this point in time. It's already late March. Resolutions are out the door. You're either sticking to them or you're not. But it's really, really challenging. But this is all about just eating healthier, finding a way to supplement your diets, or to get the right kind of nutrients that you might be looking for to get you going throughout the day. And that's why we keep talking to you about Built Bar. Not only are they delicious, soft and easy to chew, 100% covered in chocolate, and so many delicious flavors, but they get you what you need, whether you're looking for the right protein, the right nutrients for whatever diets you might be, whether it's keto, whether you're a vegan, or anything along that spectrum. Then these protein bars are the ones for you. And again, so many delicious flavors. You can get a mixed box with all your favorites. If you find the one you like, just order a box of that. So many different great flavors to choose from. You won't be disappointed. It'll fuel your workout. It'll fuel your day. If you're trying to get to and from the office and you don't have time because everybody's schedule is under a time crunch right now, then this is the snack for you. And believe me, you won't regret it. Go to built.com and go use the promo code, locked15. You get 15% off your order, but only if you go to built.com and use the promo code LOCK15 for 15% off. So go to built.com. Just a reminder that you can always reach us via email at lockdownheat@gmail.com or via Twitter using the hashtag AskLOHeat. Be sure to please subscribe to the show and leave a review. We love getting feedback from you. We love getting questions for you, and that's why we have this edition of the mailbag that we love to be able to answer all of your questions. So make sure you send those to us in so many different ways. But this next question, this last one comes in from Taylor. He writes in, I agree with Wes that if this team loses in the first round, it would be
another one for agreeing with me.
Total disappointment. Oh, that's not fair. What do you guys think are the most disappointing seasons in his? Look, before
This
we
is
get
a great
into
question.
Yes, I agree. And secondly, I also want to say it's not like I'm like rooting for this team to lose or anything like that. I've covered. No. And our point, what I think Taylor is talking about is recently I said it would not be. I think when we were talking with Ron Nutkerny of Sports Illustrated, I said it wouldn't necessarily be a huge disappointment.
All I know is you hate the draft. You hate the finals. You think trophies are. I really don't know why you watch basketball. I have no idea.
Because there's a lot of basketball in between the draft and the NBA.
Like, you don't even
finals.
care if the team wins, though.
Of course I do. Like, to me, winning is certainly much better than watching this team losing. And I covered a very disappointing season, and as you well know, because you were covering it alongside with me. But at the same time, look, there's things that happen over the course of the season you can't control. Like, I know NBA Twitter gets all wrapped up about a lot of different things, but Richard Jefferson sending out a tweet about 2016 and Draymond Green getting suspended for that game and winning that championship. You think anybody in Cleveland gives a rat's ass whether or not Draymond gets suspended or not? They've got a championship, but you know what else that is? A damn fluke. Toronto fans are going to carry the 2019 championship with them to the grave. They might never win another one, but you know what? They won it that year. Why? Because Clay got hurt, because KD got hurt. That's what matters. And Kawhi Leonard's a pretty good player, too. Everybody seems to forget about that. So I think fluky things happen. You can't count on them. I still think Miami should have won a couple of years ago in the bubble, if not for Bam and Goran Dragic getting hurt. And I've been pretty consistent about that, too. So I just think winning, it can't be the end-all, be-all, because things happen that you cannot control.
I understand.
That lead towards losing.
Fair enough. However, if the Heat are fully healthy, losing in the first round would be disappointing. I don't care who they play, even Brooklyn. Like it would just.
Okay.
I'm not that impressed with this Brooklyn Nets team. This is a great question though that we got, and it is fun to kind of go back and think about the years that were disappointing, right?
Yeah.
I think let's just get the first one out of the way because I think everybody's already thinking it. The 2010-2011 season, losing to the Dallas Mavericks,
Clearly.
first year of the Big Three. We don't
Clearly.
really have to go down that road because we've talked. Everybody, the entire NBA universe has talked about it enough. LeBron being afraid to post up JJ Barea, just not doing anything, literally being the living meme of the stick do something meme. That sucked. I still my hot take about that year is I'm impressed they even made it to the finals. I know that they did the not 3, not 4, not 5, not 6, not 7 thing, but nobody anticipated the level of criticism that LeBron would have. The fact that he was playing villain that entire season, the intense media coverage, the constant media coverage and criticism that team got, just what that did to that team mentally. Nobody could have seen that coming. It's why Chris Bosh broke down in tears walking off the court when they lost against the Mavericks. So I still think that given all of that and sort of the microscope that was on that team for so many months in a row, I still find it impressive that they even made it that far.
So is it a disappointing season or not?
But it is disappointing. It is disappointing just because
how
of the
can
way
it be
LeBron.
Disappointing and they still they still sounds.
It would have been one thing if LeBron played awesome and they lost to like the 20. That's why the 2014 Spurs isn't on here, right? Losing a 24 because that team was awesome and it was okay to lose to an awesome team.
Well,
the Heat should not have lost to that Mavericks team. Dirk Nowitzki went on podcast lately, he's touring for this new book that he came out and said, had we not caught Miami in the first year of that Big Three, we'd probably lose that series. Very honest by Dirk. By the way, it's kind of sucked listening to the Dirk thing. He's so likable, man. And I know as a Heat fan, you're supposed to hate him. He is so likable.
I don't want to say anything about that because
he's so likable.
Having talked to him,
I've interviewed him a couple times. Yeah,
and
such a likable dude.
I had a one-on-one with him once, and I was like, "Oh man!" Like it changed my whole. I had a huge paradigm shift there in the locker room as he's making time just to talk to me after a game in Orlando where he's like in his last season, he's like limping off the court. He's a mess. His like whole lower body is soaked in ice, and he's still like talking to me, and I'm like, can I hate this guy? Should I hate this guy? It really changed my.
Is that the biggest disappointment in Heat history? Is liking Dirk Nowitzki?
It ranks up there. But I will say, look, having talked to Jason Terry too, and asking him about that series, that was like a dagger in the heart. He's also likable, but he was also pretty clear, like getting that tattoo and talking about how he got that tattoo and everything else like that. It really stunk. But you know what? Fuck Brian Cardinal forever. I'll say that.
Jason Kidd too. Yeah. Screw
yeah. All right. Yeah.
All right. So I got another one. I think this one's pretty obvious too. The 2006-2007 season, losing the year after they win their first championship with D Wade, Shaq, and that Gary Payton, Antoine Walker, that group, to come back and not be able to defend it, and then lose in the first round to the Chicago Bulls. That was really disappointing. That was Miami's first chance at a dynasty, right?
Yep.
Because Shaq wasn't at the peak of his powers. They probably should have won the year before they actually won too, if not for the injuries. But that was tough because you saw then those relationships fraying with Shaq and the coaching staff and everything like that. And you kind of knew once they lost to the Bulls that it was over, that exciting run. And that was the first time that the Heat were exciting. You know, nothing against the Alonzo Mourning, Tim Hardaway, all that. But this team was exciting. It had Shaq, it had star power. D Wade, obviously a superstar on the rise. And you kind of just wondered where they go from here. So that was disappointing.
Hey, look, it started with opening night when they got absolutely shellacked by the baby Bulls. Eddie Curry, Tyson Chandler, Kirk Heinrich, etc. Like I remember going to like a bar in Coconut Grove with my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, and just watching the playoff series, and the bartender was a Bulls fan, and I swear to God, I wanted to cave his face in because that series was so frustrating. Like she actually escorted me out of there as I was starting to get more and more worked up about it, which is why I don't get so worked up about it right now. But that shows again to the same point. It's like this was a team with talent, and things fall apart. You assembled this team; they had a short, shelf life, and that was pretty apparent because they just couldn't keep it going. They probably should have had it in 2005, but again, a Dwayne Wade rib injury kept them from 2 consecutive championships. But yes, I think this is absolutely
kind of, now that we're talking about it, I bet you that's how Celtics fans feel about like the KG, Pierce, Ray Allen teams. They only got 1, but had Kevin Garnett not gotten hurt that one year, they'd probably win 2. they probably win back-to-back finals. But yeah, it's to your point. This is why you can't care about winning, is because stuff happens. You're
Thanks. I'm
just
glad you're coming
pretty
around
much
to my.
exactly what you said.
Yeah,
Um,
I'm telling you. I've
all
been
right,
right all along.
I got three. All right, we've got three more.
Yep.
We could go in any direction here. Let's
To me,
keep it with that
the
Dwayne Wade era, the
yeah.
2009-2010
Oh,
season.
speaking of the Celtics,
Yeah, good point. I mean, that was so they trade for Jermaine O'Neal at the deadline in 2009. They come back. They have Jermaine O'Neal, Dwayne Wade at the absolute peak of his powers. They
yeah,
have a young Mario Chalmers, a young Michael Beasley, who we still didn't know was a complete bust, right? We expected a leap from Michael Beasley in going into his second year there, and they make the playoffs, but then lose in the first round of the playoffs there as a 5 seed to the 4 seed Boston Celtics. And Dwayne Wade just had a bananas series. Like he was scoring 33 points a game. I mean, literally 33 points per game on 33.2 points per game on 56.4% shooting, 40% from three-point range, 6.8 assists a game, 1.6 steals a game, 1.6 blocks per game. That series is part of the reason why LeBron came down here, right? Is because he wanted to play with that guy. But nobody else stepped up. Namely, Jermaine O'Neal. And you've got a Jermaine O'Neal point here, and I'll let you get to it. But before, I'll tell everybody the stats. Jermaine O'Neal in that series, 4.2 rebounds, or 4.2 points on 20% shooting and 5 rebounds a game. Just an absolute disappointment of a series for him.
yeah. Look, that series. Watching it now and thinking about it, and I've still carry this point with me 13 years later. Is that if Jermaine O'Neal just lives up to his regular season averages, and there were moments there where he was missing bunnies, like
Yeah.
5-foot hook shots. This was a talented player towards the tail end of his career, but still able to contribute during the regular season. If he just lived up to his regular season averages, or even just below, Miami has a chance to knock off a team that had just won the championship a couple years earlier. And I know some of those games weren't particularly close, but Miami had the momentum, and it just felt like it kept slipping away every time they threw the ball into O'Neal. He was absolutely the worst player there. That's all I got. That's all. I think of
Can
that
we just
series.
shout
I
out
think
D
of
Wade
O'Neal.
one more time, because the Heat go down 0-2 in this series. Boston just shellacks them in the first 2 games in the Garden there. Game 3 comes back to Miami. Dwayne Wade scores 34 points, but Boston wins by 2, 100-98. But wow, did the Heat put up a fight there? If
Yeah.
Jermaine O'Neal only scored 2 baskets, they would win that game.
Yeah.
Game 4, right? So you're down 3-0 now. You're the Miami Heat. You're down 3-0. You lose the last game at home by 2 points. Dwayne Wade is not going home. He is not
Without
getting
a fight,
swept.
yeah.
He scores 46 points, beats the Celtics single-handedly. The Heat beat
Superhuman
Boston
effort.
101-92. Superhuman. Great word, David. 46 points. That's insane. Game 5 comes back. Dwayne Wade does his best, 31 points, but the Heat lose 96-86. They shouldn't have. I mean, look, it's weird that we're calling, like, the Heat were the 5th seed, Boston was the 4th seed. It was still the big 3 Boston Celtics. They were a really good team, but and so it might be weird to say that losing in a 4-5 round in the first round would be disappointing, but everything you're saying, like, you could feel it. It was just we had already wasted 1 peak Dwayne Wade year, and you just got the feeling like, man, if just you can get some freaking teammates,
Right.
what this team could do. That summer, he got some freaking teammates.
It's
But
funny though, but he's acknowledged it like after his career, right? Like how he retooled his team around Jimmy Butler, and Dwayne's been on record saying, well, why didn't Pat do that during 2008, 2010 when I was at my peak? Because clearly there's resentment there. He was so good. He was such a great player, a top 5 player in the NBA, top 3 MVP candidate, and yet they had this cast of characters like not just Jamario Moon and others, not to knock any one of these guys who was in the NBA, but from a talent perspective, they were clearly lacking. Barely able to break 90 points on some occasions there. Just a sad showing. But speaking of sad showing, to me, one of my other most disappointing seasons is the 2016-17 season.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for me, I can't separate the personal element of it that you and I were launching this podcast. I think that might have been the first year of the Locked On Heat podcast. We were struggling trying to talk about Luke Babbitt, Derek Williams, James Johnson, and others. That season started off as bad as you could possibly start off, with a 10-31 start. That was horrific. trying to come up with topics on a nightly basis, what to say is like, well, they really lost, or wow, did they lose?
We had a whole
Like,
segment on a daily basis called the Power Forward Belt
yeah,
that year,
yeah,
and it was
yeah.
based on awarding to which power forward had the best game between Luke Babbitt, James Johnson, and
Derek Williams.
Derek
And Derek Williams.
Williams.
Yeah, because there was that rotation. Like, who do you start? Babbitt with that stat line of
I don't even
0,
want to
0,
talk about
0
it.
and 2 rebounds.
Such
Yeah.
PTSD. I can't do it.
Yeah. So, but then the flip side of that is you start off 10-31, and then you go 31-10, and you got Dion Waiters playing out of his freaking mind for all the hatred that he's gotten since then, and all the problems between him and the franchise. Dion was insane. Goran Dragic was incredible. They found
7-11.
chemistry. Hassan Whiteside took his game to another level. They were just effective. Josh Richardson played his role. It was just a much, much, much better team. And then to fall short by one game of the playoffs, and who knows what would have happened. And you brought up a good point before we started recording. Had the play-in tournament been in existence, this team would have gone on into the play-in tournament. And I like their chances with Dion simply giving zero fucks and being able to do what he had done that season. Like, it would have been an impressive showing. Who knows what would have happened in the playoffs if that team had been able to get into. But just
so the Bulls snuck in as the 8th seed at 41-41. Remember, so because the Bulls had the head-to-head tiebreaker over Miami that year. Had there been a play-in, I am convinced Miami gets in. So the play-in, they would have been, I think they win that. Well, no, because they would have been the 9 seed, so they would have been in the 9-10 game.
Going up against LeBron James.
Seed.
Yeah, going up against LeBron James in the 1 seed. Is that the 1 seed at that time in 2017?
No. Boston had the 1 seed that year.
Oh, right. Yeah, the overachieving Boston team. Yeah, come on, scrubs. I think no problem. Yeah.
So the Heat beat the Celtics. Who was on that team?
Marcus Smart, Jay Crowder. It was before Jaylen Brown, so it was.
It was Jaylen Brown's first year. It was Jaylen Brown's first year, but before Jason Tatum. Jaylen Brown.
Kelly Olynyk. Kelly Olynyk was on that team too, right? Was it
Avery Bradley?
Bradley. Yeah.
They could have beat that team. A young Terry Rozier. I'm not scared. They got Isaiah Thomas that year. Was that the year that he finished like in the MVP?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, maybe they don't. Maybe they don't win that series. I don't know. He was really
we'll
good
see. That would have been a challenge, but it never happened, and that's what makes it so disappointing. And then lastly, for me, it's the 2000-2001 season. That's probably for you old head Heat fans. Like, you have to go back in the time machine, but of course, they break up the team in 2000. They trade, Tim Hardaway towards the tail end of his career. They trade Jamal Mashburn for Eddie Jones. You get rid of PJ Brown. You get Brian Grant in there. You trade for Anthony Mason. You make all these moves. They really, really overachieved during the regular season. Why? Because following the 2000 Olympics, Alonzo Mourning is diagnosed with his debilitating kidney disease. He misses almost all the season. And yet they still somehow finding this incredible cohesion, making the playoffs with Pat Riley still as the team's coach. He gets this team to that next level. They're going to the playoffs, and then Alonzo, partly driven by ego, I assume, wants to come back and play, and he completely overturns the team's chemistry. Everything falls apart. Anthony Mason, who was a one-time All-Star, rest in peace, Anthony Mason. He had a fantastic season in Miami. He was the team's center, and he was like the Draymond Green ahead of his time, and that he was a smallish player, but he made passes. He controlled the low post. He could do so much. He wasn't shooting the ball from the perimeter like Draymond occasionally does, but he was just the linchpin for this team's offense, and he was really, really good. He got reduced to a 6-man role. He couldn't really function alongside Alonzo Mourning. Just the whole chemistry was a mess. They go into the playoffs. They limp in there, and they wound up getting beat by the Charlotte Hornets and Jamal Mashburn, seeking some revenge against the team that traded him. So it was a very, very, very disappointing season for me.
That's it.
Any takeaways? I mean, I'm sure there's others, like we overlooked.
No, the 2014-15 year, you trade for Dragic at the deadline. Chris Bosh and him never get to play. That was a little disappointing. That was more of a disappointing event, not so much a disappointing season, because we really didn't know what was happening with Chris Bosh until much later. But no, I mean, plenty of disappointing years in Miami Heat history, for sure.
And that's why winning doesn't matter. I mean, look, I'm thinking about the bubble. Like, to me, like, the bubble was disappointing just because of the final outcome, but the season itself was a great one. They overachieved at the start of it with the acquisition of Jimmy Butler. They get the trade, and then, well, you know what? There's so much going on in the world around us, between social justice issues, the pandemic itself, and everything that was going on. It feels like an eternity ago. But for them, that bubble run was, even personally for me,
that was fun. That can't be. If anybody's disappointed by that, like, that was fun.
as
was
a
fun.
crusty media person, I was inspired by the bubble run and by Jimmy Butler and by everything that Goran and Bam did for this Heat team. So that team will always hold a special place in my heart. But anyway, we'll move on.
Last thing before we sign off here, just a shout out to Tim Hardaway making the Basketball Hall of Fame. Big news.
Absolutely. Tim Bug, second best point guard in Heat history, I still think, but
Yep.
still a very, very good player while he was here. And it looks like he's getting a lot of love from the Golden State fans.
Yeah,
I know that
they
was
love him out there.
yeah, that was the peak of his career, and then beset by injuries and a career that might have just wound up getting washed out. He winds up coming over here, rehabilitating and resurrecting his career and leading Miami to some really impressive playoff runs that fell ultimately just short. But thanks so much for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Make sure you make your second listen Locked On NBA with Locked On experts covering the biggest stories around the league Monday through Friday in less than 30 minutes. It's free and available wherever you get podcasts, just like this one. This is David Ramil signing off for now. Thanks so much for joining me, Wes.
Wrap it up, B. Like and subscribe on YouTube, guys.